Hello friends, welcome to Midlife. Today we'll be studying about the ascending tract. The ascending tract performs sensory function and it has altogether 8 tracts. Number 1 is known as lateral spinothalamic tract. Number 2 is anterior spinothalamic tract. Number 3 fasciculus gracialis, which lies medially. Fourth, fasciculus cuneatus laterally. Fifth, dorsal spinocerebellar tract. Sixth, ventral spinocerebellar tract. Seventh, spino-olivary tract. And eighth one is spinotectal tract. So first, we will talk about the sensations which are of two types, that is crude and fine sensation. The crude sensation has 4 types, that is touch, pain, temperature and pressure, whereas fine sensation is of 5 types, that is tactile localization, second tactile discrimination, third stereognosis, fourth vibration, fifth proprioception. First, let us talk about tactile localization. So, what it is? It is the individual's ability to accurately identify the site or location of tactile stimulation, that is touch, pressure or pain. Next one is tactile discrimination. That is, it is the ability to differentiate information through the sense of touch. Third one, stereognosis. It is the ability to perceive and recognize the form of an object in the absence of visual and auditory information by using tactile information. Vibration, we all know what it is, and the proprioception is known as sense of position in space. So, the sensation goes to brain with the help of different order of neurons, and there are 3 types of neuron, that is first order neuron, second order neuron and third order neuron. The sensation which is used to travel in the area 312, which is also known as primary sensory area of the brain, the ascending tract is required for the sensation to travel to the area known as primary sensory area of the brain, that is area number 312. So there are 2 different tracts for crude as well as fine sensations. First, let's start with crude sensation. It is very important. So this is the cross section of the spinal cord, and this is the cerebral cortex of brain. It is the internal capsule. T represents thalamus, and we'll discuss later about fine sensation. As we have already studied that the gray matter of the spinal cord lies in the center. This one is the gray matter, and the white matter lies at the periphery of the spinal cord. And these are the horns known as posterior and anterior horns. Both horns come out and forms the anterior and posterior root respectively, and both root meet to form the spinal nerve. Now let us come to crude sensation, that is touch, pain, temperature and pressure. For crude sensation, there are receptors present on our skin. When any stimulus comes near these receptors, the sensory fibers takes the sensation from that point to the spinal nerve. From the spinal nerve, the fibers travels to posterior root. From posterior root, it enters into the dorsal root ganglion, which is known as collection of cell bodies, and it is the first checkpoint, that is first order neuron for crude sensation. And the fibers relay on dorsal root ganglion, and from there it comes out and goes to dorsal root, and from there the fibers goes to the posterior horn, that is the dorsal horn of gray matter of the spinal cord. So the dorsal horn is known as second checkpoint, that is second order neuron for crude sensation. After relaying on the dorsal horn, from there it crosses to the opposite side to anterior column of white matter. From there the fiber starts to climb up towards the brain, crossing medulla and pons. It reaches to thalamus. So here the thalamus is known as third order neuron for crude sensation, and the tract which is taking the fibers from the spinal cord to the thalamus, it is known as spinothalamic tract. So the spinothalamic tract is known as first ascending tract, and after relaying on the ventero-posterolateral part of the thalamus, the fibers travel through the internal capsule and finally it reaches to the area 312 of the brain. So it was all about the crude sensation. The dorsal root ganglion is the first order neuron. Dorsal horn is second order neuron, and the thalamus is known as third order neuron. Now let us talk about the fine sensation. So the fine sensation, as we have already discussed, it has 5 types, that is tactile localization, tactile discrimination, stereognosis, vibration and proprioception. Now again the receptor for fine sensation takes the sensation towards the spinal nerve. From the spinal nerve, the fibers goes to the dorsal root. From dorsal root, it enters into the dorsal root ganglion, which is known as first order neuron of fine sensation. From there, it relay on the dorsal root ganglion, and again from there it comes out on the dorsal root. From the dorsal root, it goes to the posterior column of white matter. The white matter of posterior column, it has two parts. The medial one is known as fasciculus gracialis and the lateral one is known as fasciculus cuneatus. So the fibers enters on lateral and medial parts of the white column, that is posterior white column of the spinal cord respectively. And from here the fibers which are present on fasciculus gracialis, it goes to nucleus gracialis, and from fasciculus cuneatus the fibers travels upwards to the nucleus cuneatus. The nucleus, as we know, it is the collection of cell bodies. Now the tract which takes the fiber from corresponding posterior white column of the spinal cord to the respective nucleus is known as the tract which takes the fibers from corresponding posterior white column to the respective nucleus is known as fasciculus gracialis and fasciculus cuneatus respectively, or dorsal column or tract of Gull and Burdak. Now the fiber travels anteriorly to the opposite side. The fibers which take it to the opposite side is known as internal arcuate fibers. From here it climbs up to the thalamus. Through internal capsule it finally reaches to the area 312 of the brain. Now let us see this table which is very important. So the sensations that travels from our skin towards the area 312 of brain, it has respective checkpoints that is known as first order, second order and third order neurons. So for the crude sensation, the first order neuron is known as dorsal root ganglion. The second order neuron is dorsal horn cell, also known as substantia gelatinosa. And the third order neuron is known as thalamus or BPL nucleus. BPL means ventero-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. And for the fine sensation, the first order neuron is same as crude sensation, that is dorsal root ganglion. And the second order neuron for the fine sensation is known as nucleus gracialis and nucleus cuneatus. And the third order neuron for the fine sensation is known as thalamus, same as crude sensation. So, what is syringomelia? It is the cavities which are formed near the central canal due to damage to the crossing fibers of crude sensations, and the dissociated sensory loss is seen. Therefore, the fine sensation are not lost here. Now let us come back to the ascending tract. So the first tract of the ascending tract is known as lateral spinothalamic tract. It carries sensation of pain and temperature. The first order neuron fibers starts in dorsal root ganglion. So the dorsal root ganglion is known as first order neuron. They rely by synapsing with neurons in dorsal horn of gray matter of the spinal cord, also known as substantia gelatinosa. So it is second order neuron. The second order neuron fibers cross to opposite side close to central canal and ascend as tract in lateral wide column of the spinal cord, and finally through thalamus through the ventero-posterolateral nucleus, also known as VPL nucleus of the thalamus, which is the third order neuron. From there it finally goes to the area 312 of the brain. Now let us see about the second ascending tract, that is anterior spinothalamic tract. It generally carries fibers for crude sensation, that is touch and pressure. The first neuron fibers are in dorsal root ganglion, which is known as first order neuron. They rely in gray matter of posterior horn, known as nucleus proprius, known as second order neuron. The second order neuron ascends for 1 to 2 segments and cross to opposite side in white column and ascend further as anterior spinothalamic tract. It then finally goes to the brain through ventero-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, which is the third order neuron. Then it finally reaches to the area 312 of the brain. The anterior and lateral spinothalamic tract carries extroceptive sensations from opposite half of the body. They lie in continuity with each other in the anterolateral white column of the spinal cord. The sensations of pressure, touch, temperature, and pain travels from medial to lateral aspect. Now let us come to the third ascending tract, which is known as fasciculus gracialis. It is also known as tract of Gull. It commences at caudal limit of the spinal cord. The first order neuron fibers starts from dorsal root ganglion. So the dorsal root ganglion is the first order neuron. They run directly upwards in the posterior column of white matter of the spinal cord without relaying in the spinal gray matter. As the tract ascends, it receives fibers from each dorsal root. From their fibers, which enters at coaxial and lower sacral region, are pushed medially by fibers which enters at higher levels. Then the fasciculus gracialis occupies medial part of posterior column of spinal cord and is separated from fasciculus cuneatus by postero-intermediate septum. Then fibers synapse in nucleus gracialis, which is the second order neuron. From there they enter in thalamus, VPL nucleus of the thalamus, which is the third order neuron, and finally it reaches to the area 312 of the brain. The fourth ascending tract is known as fasciculus cuneatus. It is also known as tract of Bordak. It commences in mid-thoracic region and derives its fibers from thoracic and cervical segments. Dorsal root ganglion is the first order neuron. Nucleus cuneatus is the second order neuron, and thalamus is the third order neuron, and finally reaches to the area 312 of the brain. So in this part we will stop here. We have discussed the 4 types of ascending tract. In part 2 we will discuss the remaining 4 tracts of the ascending tract. So this much for today. Please like, share and subscribe for more videos of neuroanatomy. Thank you.